Okay, welcome to the podcast. I'm Dr. Lori Marvis, and today I'm so honored to welcome Mr. Louie Psihoyos. How are you today, sir?
Very good, thank you.
Excellent. Well, everyone should know you as the director of Game Changers, which is the new incredible plant-based documentary that's out. But before we get to that, I love to hear your history because I've been doing some research on you and I'm utterly fascinated as I have a child that's also studying film and wants to make documentaries. So if we could just dive into, how did you get into photography that led you to film?
Oh boy, how much time do you have? we can tell the short version. I mean, I come from a working class family in Iowa, and I always thought that I'd have to work very hard to make a living, with manual labor, but I loved art. I loved photography, and when I was in high school, I took a photography course, and there was somebody from the local newspaper that came to talk, and it started to dawn on me, man, this guy gets paid for that. And I think like a lot of people my age, they loved National Geographic magazine, which at the time was, I think, probably one of the top one or two or possibly three subscription magazines in the world back then.
Wow.
And I wanted to work for them for my whole life. The only problem was that they hadn't hired a new photographer in about 11 years. But I got a summer job working with them, and one of the layout people that was working there told me, he said, listen, there's 30,000 working photographers in New York, and any one of them is good enough to work for the magazine. What you need to do is come up with your own ideas. And we came up with an idea almost as a joke, because Geographic always has the way that they look at the world, or they looked at the world at that time, this is back in about 1980, was incredibly optimistic. They make Uganda, which was riddled with war and AIDS, look like a great place to live. And we had sort of we would make up our own stories, our friend the maggot, life goes on inside a corpse, or bulldozer across America. And we were just riffing on there was a photographer back then by the name of Fred Ward who did these commodity stories like gold, silver, platinum, and he said, let's do one on garbage. And this guy I was talking with said, well, we could do garbage art. And I said, boy, I just remember reading about these people up in Northern California that do, art from found objects. And I said, well, we could do Geographic does people look, mining through the garbage. And he says, well, I just read about this garbologist from the University of Tucson that goes through garbage, looking with the archaeological class. And I wrote it up almost, it wasn't a joke. I mean, to me, it was really serious, because a lot of photographers of my generation wanted to use the magazine to travel. And I certainly did, but I wanted to do something different. And back then there was only one mandatory recycling program in all of America. And I just saw that as I had an environmental bent. So I thought, well, let's make let's call the working title of that project, I called it Urban Ore. And so that became a cover story. They liked the idea. They hired me, became the first photographer they hired in over a decade. And it became a cover story in about, 30 some pages. But it's the first way a lot of people really started to get the idea of recycling in America. And I realized that now, this part is interesting to me, and I think it's really important that I'm not saying it sparked the environmental movement for recycling, but it certainly became part of that chorus to see that a cover story of everybody's favorite magazine to be featuring garbage on their cover. And there's some really good science that shows that to create social change, you need 10% of the population to be 100% committed to an idea, and then social revolutions are unstoppable. That's the tipping point. And I called up the lead author on that paper, and I said, well, what's with 10%? Why not 6% or 7% or 17? And he sent me back the paper, and in it was 3 pages of algorithms and graphs and to me just arithmetic gibberish. And I said, can you give it to me in a lay language? He said, yeah. He said, it's like if you're trying to create steam, you'll never be able to do it unless you get water to a boiling point. He said 10% of the population, 100% committed to an idea, is the boiling point for the spread of social ideas. And with Geographic, with that article, about 11 million people saw the magazine, got the magazine. Another 4 people saw each magazine. So, maybe 15, 18% of America saw that issue. And it starts to heat this up, this idea. And, what they say in the movie business, that somebody needs to hear about an idea 6 or 7 times before it becomes part of their psyche. And I feel like everything that we do, whether it's in stills or films, or if you're doing this kind of work, it's about turning up humanity to the boiling point so that we can use this very, very powerful medium to spread social ideas for good. That was how I got involved in photography. Then back in 1993, I was asked to do a story for National Geographic on the information revolution. This is like pre-internet. And one of the guys that actually helped start the internet, the first commercial internet browser, was the guy by the name of Jim Clark. He was kind of the Steve Jobs of my generation. He had started Silicon Graphics. He was an incredible man, and I wanted to photograph him really badly for the information revolution story for National Geographic, but he was like, he couldn't be bothered. But he was an amazing guy. When he was in college, he helped send man to the moon when JFK called to put Americans on the moon by the end of the decade. He was a college student working at Boeing, where the scientists were designing the engines, and his job was to take these cards and funnel them to the computer. And he says, that's never going to happen. It's just, the bottleneck stops at me. So he got permission from his boss to get a bigger computer, speed it up by 20-fold, and he made that happen. So that's just, I'm setting up Jim because he's an important character in my life. So I couldn't. So then when he started teaching at Stanford, he built the 3D graphics engine, the first way you could design games and do CAD CAM in 3 dimensions. The day he stopped that, he started Netscape, the first commercial internet browser. He started WebMD, and that's when I filmed him. I filmed him about, I guess you fast forward about 10 years, I'm working for Fortune magazine at that point, and he was building a boat with the world's tallest mast over in Holland, and I flew over to meet him finally. And we were, having drinks at a restaurant there, and he says he was starting a new billion-dollar company called Shutterfly, and he said, would you teach me how to be a good photographer? And I said, Jim, I'll teach you how to be a great one if you teach me how to be a billionaire. And he would actually pick me up on his jet over in Jeffco, and we would fly around the world taking pictures. We did this for a good part of almost 10 years. And he built the best underwater camera in the world, because a lot of what we were doing back then was underwater photography. And I really looked up to Jim. He was my best friend, and we were diving all over the world. He said, Louie, I want to take you to the best place I've ever been for diving. And we picked me up. We flew to Papua New Guinea. We sailed for about a day and a half, and we dove on the coordinates of that spot that was supposed to be the best. And he had came up, and he was crying. He said it was just rubble. The whole, that whole area had just turned to rubble. We don't know what it was with dynamite fishing or something. But it was obviously a catastrophe. It was just all gone. And we had noticed that every time we came back to a dive spot, it was our 3rd time in the Galapagos. We didn't have a baseline except in our memory, but we always remembered we'd come back the same time of year. Let's say, let's go back to this area, and it was always worse. It wasn't getting better. And this was our 3rd time in the Galapagos, and we saw fishermen illegally long lining in a marine sanctuary. And Jim said to me, somebody should do something about this. And I said, how about you and I? And he said, what do you mean? I said, we'll use your money and my eye, and we'll make films. And that's how we started the Oceanic Preservation Society. And the first film we did was called The Cove. And The Cove became the most winning documentary in history. Won, about 100 awards, from Sundance to the Academy Award. And that film's about dolphin hunting in Japan. And at that time, they were killing about 23,000 dolphins and porpoises every year in Japan for human consumption. A lot of it was being force-fed to school children. They were trying to get a program where they were getting kids acclimated to eating dolphin meat for school lunch programs. And you have to set this up a little bit. You know, all the dolphin meat that's ever been tested in Japan for the last 25 years has been shown to be toxic, anywhere from 5 to 5,000 times more mercury than allowed if it was a fish. Of course, it's a mammal. So that's how they got around this loophole. So these, you know, it was, they were working on spreading it all over Japan. And so we did this film, and, you know, it started to get a lot of attention. And like I said, won a lot of awards. But the most important thing about that film is that, you know, dolphin hunting, I think for the last, dolphin and porpoise hunting, for the last statistics I remember, it's like they killed about 1,610.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's, so it's like a 97% drop in dolphin deaths. So the, you know, films, you know, it was the activism around the film, and there was other events that went on, but, you know, I could see that film is really powerful. You know, you can, you know, I call it a weapon of mass construction. You drop a bomb, you kill people. You make a film, you create allies. It's the opposite. And now there's Japanese people in Japan have picked up the mantle, and they're now protesting what's going on over this, because it is still happening, just a fraction of it left. But you know, people are still working on it. So, you know, we're not making, you know, I run this nonprofit organization, OPS. You know, we're really starting movements more than we're making movies. Movies are just the way that one of the ways that we try to create social change. The second film we did, I guess I'll just give you a little bit of a background, is that I did a film called Racing Extinction, which is about the worldwide extinction crisis. And I remember this was 10 years ago. People hadn't heard of it. And I thought, well, this is the biggest story in the world, that we're going through a mass extinction. I did 4 stories on extinction for National Geographic magazine. I wrote a book about dinosaurs at the midlife of the planet, the Mesozoic. And so this is always on my mind. And Michael Novacek, when we were looking for dinosaurs in the Gobies, you know, I was like, man, what happened to all these dinosaurs? Because they were laid out, you know, usually out west, you see dinosaurs, and they're, you know, you might find part of a leg or a bone. You know, they're very rarely all in situ, you know, laid out, you know, tip of the nose to the tip of the tail. But in this area of Mongolia, the Flaming Cliffs, you saw them, you know, whole dinosaurs laid out. I said, what happened? You know, and they didn't know exactly know. But he said to me, you know, we're going through a mass extinction right now. And I was like, what do you mean? He says, oh yeah, you know, there's, you know, 4 major drivers of extinction: habitat destruction, pollution, invasive species, and overconsumption. And that's when I decided to do this film on, you know, this, what they call it, the Anthropocene, or the Anthropocene, the 6th mass extinction on the planet. And we did this film for Discovery. I think 36 million people saw it in 220 countries and territories on the first day. We did these massive projection events that, you know, maybe some of your readers remember. We projected endangered species on the Empire State Building. And, you know, I remember the producers over at Discovery said, you know, at that point they had licensed the film. They said, well, we don't really need that for the ending. You already have a good ending. You know, in August in New York, projections on the Empire State Building, people, you know, all the important people are going to be in vacation at the Hamptons or over in Europe. And the press won't be able to show up because it's still dark late, and that'd be overtime on a Saturday night. It'll be a non-event. Well, we had 939 million media views by Thursday. It was the top trending story on Facebook and Twitter for 4 days worldwide. And we stopped Fifth Avenue like it was the Easter parade. It was just like, I remember we had rented out the top of a bar on 28th Street overlooking the Empire State Building. My son had come up and said, Dad, there's people out in the street. I thought he meant people on the street waiting to get into the bar. Because it was, and then he said, well, look over the side. And Fifth Avenue was like, looked like the Easter parade, people looking up at this event. And we thought we couldn't get any more attention on this subject than that. And then the Pope called, and he wanted us, and then he wanted us to project endangered species on the Vatican during COP21, while world leaders were deciding the fate of humanity.
Right.
And, you know, remind him, you know, because Pope Francis is named after, you know, St. Francis, the patron saint of animals. So that event, we had 4.4 billion media views. I think 2.25 million people saw it live in St. Peter's Square. 600 media was there. And, you know, I like to think that we had a little bit of a handle, a little bit of an influence sparking people to what was going on. And we certainly got up close to that 10% number. And I think what you're starting to see now is, you know, some of the after effects of what a lot of people were doing is to get, you know, wake up the people in the world that, you know, climate change isn't just about, you know, polar bears and rising rivers, everything's going to be affected by this.
Right.
Then, and then, you know, but when we're doing that film, you know, you look at these drivers, the biggest driver, this kind of leads us up to what we're talking about, I hope, is that when you look at the major driver of mass extinctions is habitat destruction. And that's for raising the animals that we're going to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you look at, I think it's like 3/4 of available land that we've used in the world is used for, you know, for raising animals or animal feed for the animals that we're going to eat. And then these two producers had been working on this film, you know, The Game Changers, and they, you know, they were amateurs. They'd never done a film before. Not like I had this great experience, but they said, "Would you help us on this film?" And I started to think, "Oh, geez, you know, I'm so busy, but you know, this is actionable. You know, like, you know, when people want to know if there's something that they can do to mitigate a mass extinction, we need to change what's on their plate before we can, you know, change the world. You know, because food is at the nexus of, you know, not just habitat destruction. It's the, you know, the raising of animals for human consumption. The greenhouse gases causes more greenhouse gases than all the direct emissions from the entire transportation sector, like 14.5%. You know, if you come at it from, you know, animal rights, if you care about animals, the average person in America eats about 10,000 animals in their lifetime. You know, you think if you get somebody that's going to live to 80, you get them at 40 years old, you become a vegan, you save 5,000 animals. If you're interested in climate change, it's 3.5 tons per year. One of our biggest looming issues is fresh water. The difference between a vegan and a meat eater is you save 401,000 gallons of water a year. You know, 9,000 square feet plus of, you know, wild land that doesn't have to be turned over to raise food for animals. And that's why the rainforests of Amazon are getting wiped out. It's because of it's soybeans, but soybeans that we're feeding the animals. So, you know, so that's why, you know, it's not, you know, people say, oh, you're interested in animal rights. Well, I'm interested in a lot of things, you know, if you want to, you know, and it's human health. I mean, and here's why I think The Game Changers is could be such a game changer, is because, you know, people act out of self-interest. You know, if you tell people, hey, listen, that burger on your plate is, you know, takes 2,500 gallons of water to make that burger, or, you know, it's, you know, you're burning 3.5 tons of carbon dioxide, until you disprove that it's normal, natural, and necessary. You know, an average person is going to go, well, I don't care. I need to do that. I need to live. You know, what do you want me to do? But this is actionable. I mean, when you upgrade your diet to a, you know, let's call it more plant-based, we know that it's the, you know, one of the biggest causes of health problems in this country. You know, there's several, but, you know, meat is at the nexus of it. You know, you talk to anybody that works on hearts, you know, that, you know, putting in stents or doing, you know, bypasses, they'll point to, like, you got to get people off of animal products. It's killing us. It's the biggest cause of disease worldwide. And it's also a lot of good evidence is, you know, one of the causes of diabetes, prostate cancer, breast cancer. Now I'm working on a film with Dr. Dean Ornish, who's trying to reverse early stage Alzheimer's. And it's too early to say, but it looks like it's working. You know, they might be able to reverse what he's done before. The people that don't know, I mean, I think in your world it probably is pretty well known, but Dean has, Dr. Dean Ornish is, with his Preventative Medicine Research Institute, he's first one to reverse heart disease, first one to reverse early stage type 2 diabetes. He's reversed prostate cancer now, like I said, with Alzheimer's. Excuse me, just for 1 second.
Sure.
You know, I think that's groundbreaking when you can, you know, show that food, what you put on your plate, has a direct influence for chronic diseases. And with The Game Changers, you know, the average guy, we did the research and found out that, you know, we know this, it's better for your health. We know it's better for, you know, climate change. We know it's going to save a lot of animals, but people don't adopt it until you can disprove that it's normal, necessary, and natural. And if you, the big impediment is not women. 70% of vegetarians are women. You know, if you go out to eat, I don't know you or your friends, but if you eat a quinoa salad, you're probably getting like, yeah, you know, thumbs up, good job. A guy does that, it's like, oh, look at you, you know. And but so we knew that we had to change men. That's why Game Changers mostly has there's women athletes in the film that are great, but we focused in on men because men are the impediment to this movement being scaled up. And so that's why it has a you know, a male bent. The film's, you know, I think it's good for a kid to look at, a man, women, older person, because, you know, the film does one of these turns at, you know, at the end of Act 1 where James Wilkes, he trains the Navy SEALs. He's a killer. He's not against type. He's not your typical vegan with a nose ring and purple hair. He's you know, doesn't have any hair, and but he's a killer. He trains the Navy SEALs how to do physical hand-to-hand combat and win. So he doesn't look like your typical, you know, card-carrying PETA, you know, banner-waving, you know, animal activist. But he got injured after he won the Ultimate Fighting Champion and tried to figure out the best food for recovery, and found out that the gladiators, you know, the original mixed martial arts, you know, combatants were plant-based, you know. But they looked at the strontium analysis of the bones, and he started like, oh my God, you know, what, you know, the gladiators, vegans. And there's some really good evidence. Pliny the Elder wrote in his, you know, he's kind of like one of the first like Roman journalists. He wrote that they were called horiari, which means the bean and barley munchers, because that's what they used for recovery. And then anyway, they got him on this whole pathway, and that's you know, we basically follow James around the world as he meets all these, like, you know, one of the world's strongest men, Patrick Baboumian, who's carried more weight further than anybody in history, and Scott Jurek, local boy, you know, who's, you know, the most accomplished ultra runner in the world. He's won Western States 7 times. He's won the Badwater race through the you know, Death Valley, 135 miles through like 135-degree heat. I mean, just he's crazy. We were with him when he ran the Appalachian Trail. It's like 2,200 miles, 46 days, almost 2 marathons a day, nonstop for 46 days straight on a plant-based diet. You know, so just, you know, so we've proven that you can be strong, you can be, you know, have endurance. And we have this wonderful scene in the film where we talk about virility, how it actually, you know, increases the guy's performance by, you know, 350 to 500%. It's just a single meal. Why are you giggling?
Some great memes, by the way, have come from that. For those who have, there's been some great memes on social media.
Yeah. I've seen them.
They're hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit. I mean, it's such an amazing story. So I've seen Game Changers 3 times. I saw the 13-minute trailer when James was at Plant Stock a few years ago. I saw it at the Boulder Film Festival. My son actually broke his leg hitting a tree skiing or snowboarding.
Oh, no.
I brought him with me. And that scene, have your mother right next to you, and I'm going, see, when you get older, here's a 19-year-old boy going, oh my God, my mother's crazy. But it's like, you know, whatever we can do to encourage them to come that path. But and then we saw it a couple of times. You know, I saw it when it came out in the Net Plantation Project. But it's a very moving documentary, and I feel like that social contagion is very, very important for physicians to pay attention to, because if we can get our physicians, because we'll touch 2,000 lives on typically a panel of our patients, especially primary care. We get a doctor on board who shares that with their patients. I feel we could move that even faster.
This is where I have the most hope. I mean, like, you know, listen, I mean, you know it better than me, but, you know, the average doctor, what, 1 to 4 hours of nutrition? It's usually what they're putting in the IV bag. You know, like we're, you know, our medical profession is some of the least equipped to teach patients about nutrition. And, you know, it's one thing, you know, listen, you know, I don't have to tell your audience probably what, you know, what the problems are, but, you know, you're very good at curing people, but way better, way easier, way less expensive is to prevent disease. And, you know, not enough effort has been put into prevention. You know, I know a friend of mine was, you know, going out to eat with a doctor for breakfast, and, you know, she was having bacon and milk and eggs, and, you know, it's like, oh my God, haven't you heard? the literature is out there. We just have all this misinformation out there. I mean, the day before we came out on iTunes, the Annals of Internal Medicine, released this, report saying that, the difference between eating processed meat and meat isn't that big of a deal. Then they started to go give recommendations on this faulty data. Now, what they had done is they'd taken, I think, several reports, a meta-analysis ostensibly, but they gamed it like you can do with any data. So they even went it against the author's recommendations to reduce meat, and came up with, like, you shouldn't do anything because you can't influence people by their eating habits anyway, which is just like crazy. And of course, it turns out that these people, their funding comes from the fast food industry. Some of these same people worked at the same organization, worked for the sugar industry. You can expect these, 2020s, when the next dietary recommendations start to come out, you can expect these people to make a salvo right about the time to cause a stir, a lot of disinformation, so that, hey, sugar's okay, cholesterol's okay, saturated fat's okay, meat's okay. And so that's where we're fighting against. It's the same playbook that they use for cigarettes. The same, there's these organizations that's what they do. They put disinformation out there to keep the public, in the dark, which is just an absolute shame. And I don't know if this is a conscious effort. I think people they work mainly out of self-interest. I mean, how else could they get this data in there? And what they had done is that they had gone in and you can overcorrect, for these variables. Like, say, okay, we're trying to find out if saturated fat is a problem, so we're going to overcorrect for cholesterol. And then when they do that, then they, of course, make a statistic. Then they go into, they use these studies that are not good studies to look at that. They don't look at the big good studies that we have. They look at the ones that they know that they can game, and then they overcorrect for it. And then they can say, hey, look, this is peer reviewed. It's it's in a great journal, and then that is the validation. And then they've for the next 5 years, the industry's done their work. They can keep us, sick, unhealthy, and on medication, and they can keep on doing business as usual. And of course, I think what everybody in your business line of work is doing is like, we have to be part of that 10%. We have to be that, we're on the side of angels here. That, we have the information. We have to just, speak louder, more intelligent, and get the word out there, because we spend $3.6 trillion a year on sick care in America. 80 to 85% of it is reversible. These are fixable problems. We spend 6 times more on sick care than we do on defense. Yeah. We're spending more on medication now than we are on food. We are, and at the root of it is animal products, which are, obviously killing the planet. We're, between cows and humanity and farm animals, we're like 96% of the biomass of mammals on the planet. There's 4% of wild animals. So we're killing the planet. We're killing ourselves. We're killing the planet. We're needlessly killing, hundreds of millions, trillions of animals every year, needlessly. So that's why I'm passionate about this work and trying to amplify what you guys are all doing, because it's important. It's not just a movie. It's a movement that we're trying to get started.
Right. I've been vegan for 8 years, and that leads me to the question. It was a patient, actually, who we accidentally discovered a plant-based diet in Western Colorado, yeah, on the other side of the mountain. And so what led you to actually become vegan? Like, what was it? Was it something you were raised with, or what happened?
Well, it was a painfully slow process when I look back at it. In 1986, I was working for Fortune magazine. I was doing a story on the biggest independently owned ranches in America, and one of them was so big. It was in Oklahoma, and they killed about 500 cattle, of their own every day. And I went to the slaughterhouse, and the first thing that they do when they kill a cattle is they put it down the chute, and the animals are sensing what's going on. So you see the fear, and you can smell it. I mean, not the fear, but I mean, they let go of their bladder and their bowels when they see what's going on, because it's, they're not dumb. But they put, the first thing they do is they put a captive bolt to the brain. It's like a bolt with a hydraulic shot behind it, and it goes into the brain. It's supposed to kill it instantly. Then they hang it upside down. They start to strip the, you know, the hide off, and then they start cutting off pieces of it. And it's going around in this sort of like a conveyor belt, like you'd almost see at a car factory, except this one cow wasn't dead, and it's coming by me, and it's hanging upside down, and it's looking at me with this eye. And as it's going around the room, it's looking at the, you know, its tongue's hanging out, but it's looking at me, following me around the room. And I realized it's not dead. And I thought, okay, I can't, you know, now I know why they say, excuse me, you know, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, there'd be no slaughterhouses, because, you know, right there. And I thought, well, I have to stop eating animal products because I don't want to be party to this. Just to say things that walk. I thought, well, I still need to eat animals, but, you know, I'll cut it off at fish. So I ate fish. I was a pescatarian for, I don't know what, 20 some years, like 30 years. And then I made the Cove. And one of the last scenes in that movie is we take a hair sample for mercury at the Deputy Minister of Fisheries, Hideki Morinuki, and we wanted to test it for mercury, because, you know, mercury gets it bioaccumulates in the oceans. It has 6 trophic levels of the food chain, from, you know, the algae up to like a swordfish or a dolphin or a tuna. Mm-hmm. And so you can have 1 million times more mercury accumulating at the top level. And and I thought, well, I'm going to send his sample, and I'll send mine in separately just to see what mine is, because I was a pescatarian. Obviously, my son, you know, still is a professional fisherman, and I had freezers in Boulder full of fish. But, you know, he'd come back from Mexico, and I had like 300 pounds of fish, and that's what I would use, you know, for the next couple of years. And I was always eating fish for, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Thinking that I was like being super healthy, way healthier than anybody else. Well, it turns out his levels, Morinuki's mercury levels were 8 times higher than considered high. So like 8 times more than, you know, it was very serious. Mine was 44. And yeah. And I mean, that shock just went through me, because I thought, okay, well, the last thing I could hold on to was fish. What am I going to eat? You know, because I was thinking back then that, you know, you have to eat animal products. How are you going to get around that? And I just thought, I'm gonna shrivel up and die. There's not going to be anything left to eat, you know. And remember, this is about the time the Cove was coming out. We were in LA for the Academy Awards, and I met this vegan, and I said, "What do you eat?" And she goes, "Everything else. You know, all protein originates in plants. That's where do you think the cows get it from?" And, you know, and it just sort of struck me then that, you know, listen, there's people that are surviving that, you know, have a vegan diet. And that was the, you know, I still like thought, okay, well, I can get away with eating small fish, you know, and to supplement, you know, this, because I wasn't sure about that diet. And then, you know, mercury has a half-life in your body of about 70 to 90 days. And so I got it down to something that I thought was the line, you know, the levels were coming down. I thought, well, I'll just eat smaller, you know, fish, because they're smaller fish, smaller, short-lived fish are less toxic. And then my level shot back up again. I thought, well, okay, I can't mess with that, because, you know, mercury is the most toxic non-radioactive element in the world. There's nothing in it. It's destroying neurons. I've seen the brains from Minamata victims in Japan that have, they call it Minamata disease, but it's really a poisoning. And it's basically, I asked one of the doctors there, what's it mean to have mercury poisoning? And he says, it slowly erases what it means to be human. It attacks your senses. You start to lose your hearing, your sense of touch, your vision, your memory. And when you look at the brains of them, it looks like Swiss cheese where it's being eaten out. So I think I probably went vegan, you know, a little bit before you did, you know, maybe 10 years ago or something like that. But it was, you know, the last reason I did it was health. It wasn't for like animal rights or ethics. You know, it was really personal health.
Wow, that's really incredible. So your son is a commercial fisherman?
Yeah, down in Antigua in the West Indies where we used to live. Yeah.
Wow. So he hasn't been influenced by your work?
Yeah, and you know, and the Game Changers is coming out, and he says, "Dad, everybody on the island is seeing your film." And I said, "Well, I hope I don't put you out of business." And he says, "I hope you." I said, "I hope." He says, "I hope you do."
Aw, that's a good son.
Yeah,
Now you have two children.
I do.
Are any of them vegan? Your wife?
Well, my ex-wife, yeah, she
Oh,
was she's probably more plant-based now. You know, that was sort of um, that was a little. Now I don't want to get into it, but that was a little bit
no,
of
no.
the contention that we had. You know, I feel like, you know, when you start going down this path, it's not just. I mean, listen, I'm very aware. I think probably like a lot of people, this podcast is vegans can be just incorrigible. We're the worst, you know, because we think, you know, we become like evangelical about like, you know, proselytizing this diet because it's you feel like it is important. I mean, whether you're coming at it from ethics or the climate or just personal health, if you love somebody, you want them to live longer. You know, who
Hmm.
wouldn't? I mean, that's how I look at it. When you start to see like Dr. Ornish or Esselstyn or any of these people, everybody's doing it now, reversing disease. You think, well, I want my girlfriend's, you know, mother and father to have to know this information, to be living longer, so that you know they don't have to, you know, go through the pain and the suffering that doesn't have to be there. You don't.
Hmm.
You can alleviate that. You can extend lives by, you know, a long time. You know, we're dealing with these, well, we're, like I said, I'm working with Alzheimer's patients right now. And that's one of the most painful things that you can do because you start to lose your memory. And, you know, when you lose your memory, you're losing everything that was important about life. Um, and the idea that we can prevent 1 out of 3 people in America are going to be affected by Alzheimer's. You know, either you're going to be taking care of a loved one. And by the way, if you're 1 out of 3 people, this is important to know that, you know, there's a 600% chance of your mate having Alzheimer's too, because chances are you're eating the same way and your lifestyle is very much the same way. And I mean, I think these, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that it's not all diet. That's a really strong, huge component of it. But, you know, Ornish's program is, you know, whole foods, plant-based diet, not just vegan diet. Oreos and Coca-Cola are vegan. That's not what we're talking about. You know, whole foods, plant-based diet, exercise, stress reduction, and group support, and dealing or talking with, I hope I get her name right, but Dean and Aisha Shirzai from the Brain Health and
Sure, Zeiss.
Alzheimer's
Hmm.
Shirzai's
Yeah.
and Alzheimer's Clinic in Loma Linda. They would add to that sleep, getting, you know, plenty of sleep. And they told me something that was pretty astounding. We interviewed them at the Plantician Conference, and you know, they said when they opened the Alzheimer's clinic down there, nobody came. And out of the 3,000, because you know, Loma Linda is one of the so-called blue zones regions of the planet where, in one of the 5 regions on the planet where people live the longest without chronic disease, and you know, very few people came. They have 3,000 people that have come through the clinic. Only 19 of them have been vegetarians.
Really?
Yeah, in Loma Linda, there's like, I looked it up this morning. There's 24,000 people that live in the town. About 9,000 or more are, you know, almost half are Seventh-day Adventists, and the Seventh-day Adventists, by their religion, you know, they say, you know, I think where they take Genesis literally, where, you know, God said, you know, basically get, you know, let the newts and fruits of the trees be your meat, and
Hmm.
they take that, you know, so they, you know, apparently I'm going down there uh, week after next to meet them and you know, meet some of the people in Loma Linda. I mean, just I'm fascinated by like the, you know, the 80 and 90-year-olds that are working out at the gym at 5 in the morning, you know, just like, it's kind of like, I don't know, it sounds like heaven. You know what, and then it's you know, so lifestyle is obviously a huge part of this, you know, and I think everybody's trying to get to that point. Like, how do you, you know, just not make, you know, make a better life, not just for diet, but, you know, for everything else. And it turns out that, you know, I'm doing another film right now on, sorry, I'm emotional here.
No, no.
I'm doing a film right now with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, based on their Book of Joy. And, you know, a lot of the same tenets they have about what makes us happy, about what gives us, you know, true happiness. You know, people think, well, I'll be happy if I get a good job and make a lot of money, but, um, got a shiny car. All that stuff is just noise. What gives us joy, joy that makes us feel good about waking up in the morning, about doing this work. And I think they probably have it in Loma Linda, that sense of community. But when you're helping other people, when you're doing work where you're really, I mean, and we're hardwired for it. And the reason that let's say you get that award, you get that job that you always wanted, you making tons of money, or you have the beautiful mate, and it's like giving you unhappiness, is if you're not aligning your values with what makes us human, it gives us pure joy. If you're not helping other people, being supportive of other people, then you're not going to be fulfilled, and you're probably not going to live as long, because that's one of the the tenets of the Blue Zone, is just having a really strong sense of purpose as well.
Right, absolutely. Does that encompass your drive to make these incredible movies? I mean, I've seen all of them. I saw, the Racing Extinction last night, and I was so moved to do something even more. So I have 3 kids. One's in medical school. They're all vegan. One's about to finish his marketing degree, and he wants to do e-waste, recycling, social entrepreneur. And my little one wants to be like you. And I'm sending him all this stuff. And I was like, Gabe, I really need you to pay attention here, because I think these are some folks that are illustrating what you want to do. Where do you feel like that is, when you do something? Because I know what it's like to change someone's life, to get them better, to cure diabetes, and they're out traveling and seeing their kids on the sidelines, and they're playing with their kids, and they're doing all these things. For me, that is what you're talking about. It's very tangible, but this is a documentary. It's a big scale. And how does that feel to you?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's really not about me. It's really about it takes a big team, really, energetic team, that the editor, the writers, the cinematographers, getting everybody on board. It feels great once you've come together and you make a film. And by the way, the films that we do are really, most producers or directors in Hollywood would, and I'm not in Hollywood, by the way, but I'm on the fringes of filmmaking as a documentary filmmaker. You're not really, you're not in that fold, but, they look at, their scorecard is Box Office Mojo. How many butts and seats did we get this weekend? And, they're looking at the money, as a barometer of how well they did. And that's kind of what's wrong. What I was just talking about, we look at it as, minds and seats, that when you can influence somebody so that they come out of the film and they're, become one of these warriors for making the world a little bit better place. That's the goal. That's the gift. The impact from the film is what we're after. And we designed the film like that, so that people are inspired to come in, like with the help, the Cove or the, Racing Extinction, just do one thing, to start working towards that goal. Because once you start with one thing, that was part of that campaign, then you feel good, and you want to do something else, and it gets better and better. And it's important to realize too, like these problems are big. When you look at healthcare or race, extinction, but you can think, oh, that's just overwhelming. But when you realize that you can turn things around, and these social changes happen really quick. There's a futurist by the name of Tony Seba, who shows this picture of the 1905 Easter Parade in New York City, looking down Broadway, and it's like all horses, except for one car, and it's like, find Waldo, find the car. And you can imagine people, like back then there was 300,000 horses in New York, 20,000 of them dying every year. So the streets smelled bad, there flies all over, people had it on their shoes coming into the homes and the offices. It was it wasn't pretty, but you can imagine what they're thinking when they see this one car. Like, look at that crazy guy, who's he think he is? What a nut. And I remember I had the first electric car, one of the first electric cars, just to say, in Boulder. You know, we had 3 electric cars in 2007. We had 120 solar panels over, and you know, the license plate of my car said "vehicle using sun," you know, opposite of an SUV. And people thought I was nuts, you know. And you know, now I read last month that Mercedes is now building their last internal combustion engine. You know, these revolutions, these changes, you know, that we have. They talk about it took about 10 years. So anyway, the Easter parade 10 years later in New York, there's the Easter parade, and it's like, you know, find the horse, you know, and you know, people say, oh, it's going to take so long to change. Well, you know, 12 years ago, we were hitting the number 2 key 6 times to make a capital C when we texted. I mean, you know, now you look, there's nobody in an audience that has a you know, that doesn't have a smartphone. Yeah, nobody has a flip phone. But you know, and I think it's going to be that way with this diet. You know, we just keep on hammering home the science, and there's going to be people pushing back. There's going to be the industry trying to game the, you know, the good science that everybody has done to try to undermine, you know, for their own self-interest, that, you know, that these unhealthy animal foods are, you know, in fact, you know, they'll say good for you. But, you know, we just have to keep on coming back with the science and pointing out where they're wrong, where they, you know, how they are gaming the system, and who's behind them.
Right.
You know, it's the industry that has the most to lose.
Wow, absolutely. Have you heard of the I think it's the Elmhurst Farms in New York? They were a dairy.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I mean, that's such an amazing story of how you can pivot, even though you had this industry for generations in your family, but now they're following the trend and understanding the significance they can do. And it's really exciting to see those type of things happen. And I can't even imagine. But the one you're working on, is that you said the Dalai Lama, is it I don't know how to say it right, Looser or?
Oh, the Loser ecosystem. Oh, I'm working on several films. I've been, you know, I've been doing one film every 4 to 5 years, but I just realized it's not sustainable. So we have a bunch going on right now, and I'm either executive producing or directing. But the ones that I'm directing, the one on the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, it's based on their book of joy. How do you find joy in a world of sadness? Boy, I'm just there's one I'm helping out on. It's on big wave surfing. It's 4 females have gotten parity in the sport of big wave surfing at Mavericks. It's a big wave down here about 20 miles from me. It's like this killer wave, and these women have, you know, fought for and got parity across the whole sport of surfing. Wow. So it's really a film about women's empowerment. You know, you always try to figure out, okay, I don't care about surfing necessarily, but I do care about, you know, your gender getting, you know, equal standing. So I'm helping a female director work on that film. One on the it's called the Loser ecosystem, but we're calling it the last place on Earth, because it's the last place on Earth where tigers, orangutans, elephants, and rhinos are found in the wild together. And we're focusing on 4, but it's being decimated because of illegal palm oil plantations. But we're focusing on this positive story about these 4 activists who are winning back the environment for this last Garden of Eden. We've got a lot of projects going on, and you know, there's one about just probably taking it on today about getting all 50 states off of fossil fuels by 2050. And there's a Stanford professor that's worked out a plan for that. So we're working on a lot of projects at the same time.
Wow, that is such an. I was thinking about your. No problem.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I understand. The Racing Extinction. When I look across all the work that you did to put that together, I mean, I can't imagine the amount of time and planning and the coordination that takes. How do you even start such a humongous project? I mean, like, where does your brain even go to say, okay, this is what I want at the end?
It's a good question. Well, you know, in my case, I mean, you know, if you look at the structure of that film, it basically shows like, why are we doing it? And I outlined, like I told you before, that I did these 4 stories for National Geographic on extinction. And then you meet the people I talked to that informed me about extinction. Michael Novacek from the American Museum of Natural History, where he says, well, you know, this time, you know, we are the, you know, we're the, humanity is the meteor. You're really learning about it the way I learned about it. And then, you know, what was it, Ian Forster said the longest, you know, I'm probably misquoting this, but you know, you just take the first step. You know, the longest journey begins with the first step. Like, okay, let's start and, you know, try to figure out, well, where do we want to end up? You know, and we had, you know, we started that film. It's a funny story. You know, we were at the, you know, people don't know the history. So we won the Academy Awards, right? So at the run-up to the Academy Awards, I was in town. The team was getting a commendation from the city of LA. And we had found this restaurant called The Hump that was selling whale meat. And we had gone in with federal officers to try to bust this restaurant. And we got this, you know, we got the meat, we showed it to them, and they said, well, you need a chain of custody. What's that? Well, one of us has to witness it. Well, we didn't have the money to come back and do the bust, and they tried to do it themselves, and they couldn't get the restaurant to sell it to them because they probably didn't look like, you know, they probably looked like FBI agents. And but so we were down in LA like a couple months later, and I was looking around, man, we had the whole team there, you know, that we did for, you know, that did the Cove, and I thought, let's go bust the hump. So this is, so we went there. We wrangled the, you know, there's 3 federal agencies. I think Fish and Wildlife. I won't be able to remember them all now, but there's 3 agencies that we got together, and they were all at the sushi bar. Our people ordered the meat, and that's how we, you know, that's how we opened Racing Extinction, so we can kind of get into the, you know, so it feels like a heist, you know.
It was a covert operation, it looked like.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and you know, we closed down the restaurant. But here's the cool thing: is like, you know, we won the Academy Award on I guess it was a Sunday night, and then on Monday night or Monday morning, there's a front page story in the New York Times about the guys that won the hump. Just what, you know, why they were there. They were busting this restaurant, and so it just became this wonderful news story, you know. And it just the film and the, you know, just sort of went, whew, and you know, in a way, I think we have almost the same opportunity to do something very similar right now, because, you know, there's a part of the Game Changers where we talk about this industry, where they have these people that are paid to basically say, hey, asbestos is not that bad, you know, don't worry about mercury. Mercury's not an issue, and, you know, hey, look at, you know, these, you know, cigarettes are okay. You know, there's these people that they're paid scientists that, you know, get paid to go back and game the system, and that's going on right now. It's in our film that's just going on, and then, like I said, the day before it comes out on iTunes, the same thing happens. And I was telling our producers, is like, we need to capitalize on this, and we did. We you know, we went and talked to some of the writers for the, you know, Washington Post just came out with an article, I think last week, about this, but there's just more information there. This is it's a really dirty business. I mean, of course, you know, they would say, well, look who's behind you. We have, you know, people from the plant-based industry supporting our film. But, you know, like I said, we're on the side of angels. They're not.
Right.
You know?
I love that side of angels. I'm going to use that, actually. Oh, gosh. When I can't even imagine what it means to be someone who's, okay, I was in the military, right? So, and I was stationed in places I don't want to go back to, but I never had to go under covert operations with a camera. And then there's so many places that you're doing that. And I think, you were looking for shark oil or whale shark oil.
Yeah, in China, yeah.
In China, and they pulled you were like, I'm going to be mad, I'm from Brooklyn. And you were sitting there having this discussion, and someone pulls you outside, like your camera's right there. I'm like, you're like, oh my goodness, they see it. I mean,
it was a microphone, yeah.
Okay, how do you stay calm in those type of situations?
I'm not. No, I've got to be the worst one on the team for, you know, nervous Nelly. You know, the team, quite honestly, is a lot braver than I am. You know, the people they're amazing. The Game Changers doesn't, you know, I'm not even in the Game Changers, you know, but we, the third film, I thought, I don't want to be in this film. I show up once, I have like an Alfred Hitchcock moment, I show up as a cameo. When Patrick Baboumian, he's carried more weight than anybody in history, like 1,200 and some odd pounds. It's like the weight of a horse. And, they have these big, huge, like weights you see at the gym for the heavy guys. And I said, well, people don't know what that weighs. It looks like he's strange, but it's like, why don't we lift something that he can see? So the whole crew got on this called a yoke. And so he was like taking us down this German road with us on his shoulders. It was pretty funny. So I'm in the back left,
Okay.
of that. So that was but I really didn't want to be in that film because I thought, okay, let's just be, I never really thought of the Cove or Racing Extinction being about me. It's really about the issue.
Right.
But I didn't want to be, I'm getting old now. I just didn't want to be part of the, I just want to try to do a film so I want to do a film that was positive,
Right.
People say, well, what's the Cove about? Oh, it's about dolphin slaughter. Oh, great. I'll put that on my queue with 300 films in front of it. Or Racing Extinction. What's that about? Oh, it's we're world mass extinction event. So we try to make it exciting. That's it's always important to remember that you're in the film business. So it's got to be entertaining. There's a very small part of the population that really wants to be. I mean, even me, I don't. A lot of documentaries is too. Like oof. You have to sort of like be in the mental headspace to see it. Our films are, even the Cove is like, it's, it has this one scene in it that it can be haunting. It'll, scar your viewers for life. But it's, Rolling Stone said it's like a cross between Born Identity and Flipper. It's exciting. People, forget that. Like it's an exciting movie. It's a lot of fun.
Right.
Wow. It gets your heart beat up. It's not a light bite, but you're going to learn a lot when you see the Cove. You'll learn about what we're doing in the oceans. You'll see a lot of excitement. And you'll probably want to get involved. When you see what's going on, because once you see a movie like the Cove, you cannot unsee it.
Right. It's like the Earthlings. I made my kids watch that too as soon as I discovered that.
That's why they're all vegan. That's why they're scarred.
Well, they didn't have a choice, honestly. So, well, now they do. They're in their 20s. But I came home overnight 8 years ago, and my poor husband, he ended up losing 70 pounds, by the way. So he thanks me for that.
Wow.
Overnight, I had a lupus patient get better, and I was like, and another patient whose daughter pulled herself off 2 ADD meds at 16 in 30 days. And I was like, and it was an accidental suggestion. And I said, I can't continue this. I had no health issues to deal with, other than I've been hypothyroid since the birth of my second child, but that got better too. And I just couldn't not be, I have to do what I'm going to tell my patients to do. And pretty incredible stuff. But it was interesting. I had a quarter of a grass-fed beef in my freezer, in the garage. I cleaned out everything overnight. And I said, we're going on a plant-based diet. My husband's like, well, are you still cooking? I'm like, yeah. He goes, okay, whatever. I'm like, so
this is Earthlings?
No, no, Earthlings came later. This is after my patients got better after a 2-week period.
Okay.
And I came home and I said, I read the China study in 2 days and 400 pages of it. And I was like, nope, we're done. I'm not feeding you guys this, we can't. So I cleaned it all out one night. And then 2 days later, our freezer broke. No kidding. And a quarter of that grass-fed beef, the blood and the stench. And my husband's like, well, if I wouldn't we had gone to church and came back and the meat was all had to get disposed of. And I was like, I didn't know what I was going to do with that anyway. And I'm so thankful. I think it's the hand of God personally, but, but it's been amazing to see those, like you said, those ripple effects even years later of touching one life and then they touch multiple lives. And it's such I call it veggie crack. It's like my dopamine hits, like eat your veggies, give me my dopamine hit, please. But, so incredible. I mean, I do have a few fun facts I wanted to talk to you about, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, all the time. So I heard that there's something called Baby Louie named.
Oh. Yeah, well, that started in Boulder. My friends of mine.
Did it?
Yeah, Charlie and Flo McGovern were They were preparing, this is back in my dinosaur days, they were preparing this egg, and they found an embryo inside of it, like a skeleton of a baby dinosaur that wasn't hatched yet. Wow. And Bob Bacher, who's another local Boulder boy, at least at the time he was, he named it Baby Louie after me because of my work. I did a story for National Geographic, a cover story on dinosaur eggs, so they named it after me. So
that's awesome.
It's a baby.
It's carnivorous, isn't it?
Yeah, it's carnivorous. Yeah. See what time that year? Yeah. I still was back then. Yeah.
Slightly carnivorous. Oh my goodness! And then there's so I hear that you were also in Sylvester Stallone's wedding. Or no, a wedding photographer in one of Sylvester Stallone's movies, The Fist.
Yeah, Fist, Federation of Interstate Truckers, a Norman Jewison film. Yeah, I was befriended by Sylvester Stallone and Norman Jewison, and they put me in that film as a wedding photographer. It's a very small scene. I think I have a speaking part where I think my line was "Smile Now." That was a big line. So I thought I was 17, but I think I was a little bit older than that. But yeah, that was sort of my introduction to Hollywood a long time ago.
Wow. Well, how did you meet Sylvester Stallone to be in?
I was doing, this is right after Rocky. He came to my hometown in Dubuque, Iowa. And I was, when I told you I was working, I met a newspaper photographer when I was in this photography class. Well, that photographer Marshall Marvelli, worked at the Dubuque Telegraph Herald, and I was a newspaper boy there. So I was an intern. And the movie came to town. It was it was a film basically about Jimmy Hoffa, and Stallone played the Hoffa-like character. And they were looking for a town that looked like it was depressed and from the 1930s, and they picked my hometown. And I was a newspaper photographer, and a buddy of mine was a writer and said, "Hey, I think this movie's coming to town. I just met the producer on the plane coming over here. Let's do a film. Let's do a coverage of it." I started covering it, and we ended up hanging out with the film for the summer. It was actually a lot of fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, especially for a young person. I mean. Oh
yeah, it was crazy because Stallone, there probably at that time wasn't a bigger. He was just off the first Rocky, not the seventh one or whatever they're up to now. I mean, he was. Everybody wanted to. The press and everybody wanted to be in. I'll tell you the story of how this all happened. I was in the dressing room with him. He's getting his hair cut, and trying to remember how this all happened. Yeah, so we were out. Movie sets are really slow and boring, right? Nothing's going on, and there's this.
I've never been on one, so I don't know.
Oh well, there's nothing happens for quite a while. Oh. Anyway, there was this woman that wanted to meet him, and it was her birthday. Like it was her birthday, and she said to me, "Can I meet your friend over there, Stallone?" And so nothing to do. So I told Stallone, "That's their birthday." And he says, "Let's go over there. Get your camera." So I went over there, and he's talking to her. He says, "You ready?" I said, "Sure." And he gives her a kiss, and then she sort of swoons. And he said to me, "Did you get it?" I go, "One more, I think." Then he picks her up and kisses her. He said, "Do you get that one?" He said, "Do you get that one?" And I said, "No, it's one more just to be sure." We're sort of working together here. And he gives her this big Rudolph Valentino, and that was the front page of the paper the next day.
Oh my goodness!
And he says to me the next day, he says, "That picture of the paper is a nice one, but my wife and I aren't doing so well." So I got back to the paper that day, and there was everybody wanted that picture, because it was kind of a, I don't know, it was just, I was happy to be at the right moment, at the right time, and he was a big celebrity. And it's conflicted because they're offering more money than I made in the summer, right? Wow. And so I cut the negative up, and I went down to the movie set, and I said, "Hey, listen, if the picture ever gets out there, it's not because of me. Here's the negatives." And he goes, "You did that for me?" He says, "If you want to get on the set, do anything you want." And he got Norman Jewison, and then he got me a part in the movie, and that's how it all came about.
Integrity pays.
Well, yeah. I guess.
I think so. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It says volumes. When I was an intern, I'm in family medicine many, many years ago, and we were rounding, and where I was in West Texas at Texas Tech, there wasn't very many surgeon residencies. And so when they got a family practice intern, they're like, yes, fresh meat, we'll use them. And so I'd round on this. I was with a bariatric surgeon, and very electrolytes are important, potassium and things. And one of them said, one morning I was rounding at 4 a.m. I went to medical school with 3 little kids too. So it was like, I was always sleep deprived. So it's not on me to miss something, which is unfortunate. But I accidentally didn't write an order to replace the potassium of one of his patients. And he's like, this patient's potassium we're doing our rounds isn't, fixed, and who's responsible? He goes, I said, that's my fault. I'm so sorry. It won't happen again. And he just stopped everybody. He's like, what did you say? I was like, I'm so sorry. It's my fault, sir. I apologize. I'm straight-laced. Like, I'll own anything I've done because that's the way I was raised. And he's like, nobody ever does that. Nobody owns anything. And then he calls me, and then he's like calling me for everything and just laid all the work on. I was like, oh my goodness, I was being punished for being good. But it was such a clear picture to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Even, it's easier not to. But yeah, I think that's phenomenal. And there's something about finding someone's bones. A paleontologist.
Yeah,
Yep.
Edward
Drinker Cope. What does that mean that you found his bones on a museum shelf? Like bones he discovered, or his bones?
Well, yeah, him. Like, so when I was working for Geographic, there was this period. Well, I was doing the first dinosaur story I did for them. This is about 1991, and there's a period of American paleontology where two of the top paleontologists, Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Marsh, they were best friends, and they would work on papers together. They would describe dinosaurs, and anyway they became enemies when I think Edward Drinker Cope pointed out that Othniel Marsh had put the head at the wrong end of the dinosaur. It was actually a sea creature. It looks like a long lizard, but underwater. And so he put the head at the wrong end, and it embarrassed Othniel Marsh, and they became this like bitter enemies. And they would allegedly, like, one of them tried to blow up the other one's box cars full of fossils. They'd pay their field hands to try to get the fossils to them so they could describe them before the other ones. But it was a very productive period in paleontology in America between this called the Great Bone Wars, where they actually described more dinosaurs than in any other period, I believe, ever in history, because of this sort of rivalry. And I wanted to illustrate the rivalry by getting artifacts from museums. And I was, at the time I was on the East Coast, and I went to the Smithsonian Museum, not knowing what they would have there. I said, do you have any artifacts from Othniel Marsh? And the head paleontologist says, oh yeah, come on downstairs. And we went, Smithsonian, right? You're going through they only got a small percentage of the stuff on display upstairs, but you go downstairs, they have all these fossils and they had, behind a file cabinet, between the wall and the edge of a file cabinet, they had these original Marsh drawings of the first dinosaurs that were ever articulated. These are brontosaurs that were found tip of the nose, the tip of the tail. And these are the first drawings ever made of a dinosaur, what it actually looked like, because back then they only had in Europe, they'd only found pieces of dinosaurs, right? This is the first time they ever found one all together. So it's just hand drawing from Neil Marsh. And I said, I can take that. He says, oh yeah, I was going to throw it away anyway. I said, well, why are you going to throw it away? He said, well, because the curator said, how much would it cost to restore the picture? There was be like 40 of the painting, the drawing, about $40,000. He said, well, just throw it away. Just photograph it and throw it away, because we don't have money to do it. So he thought, well, we're going to throw it away anyway. He lent it to me. And so as I'm going up the East Coast to various museums, trying to collect artifacts for this illustration I'm doing for National Geographic, I remember I stopped at Philadelphia, where Cope was a curator at the Philadelphia Academy of Sciences. And I was asking the head paleontologist, do you have any Cope artifacts? And he says, oh, well, we have we have fossils that are still wrapped up by his own hands in newspapers and twine. We haven't even opened them because we know he did it, and we have railroad receipts from those, transporting fossils from the West. And he's on a shelf downstairs. And I said, what? And he said, oh yeah, he wanted to be a type specimen for mankind, to one up off Neil Marsh, who was at the Peabody Museum. And
oh my goodness.
So the way it works in paleontology, if you're the first one to describe something, you get to name it.
Okay.
So Cope wanted to be the type specimen for mankind, but apparently this is like 1890, something like 1995. I think he died, and I might have those years wrong, but anyway, he was this is Victorian era, and he had the beginning signs of syphilis. So he was like, his bones weren't pristine. They said, well, we can't have a type specimen of somebody that's diseased. So he was put on a shelf down there. He's in 2 boxes. His skull was in one, and the rest of the bones were in another. And I said, well, can I have the professor? And so I checked him out like a library book. The little card for it, so I signed it out, and I'm walking out of this museum with these fossils, and with Cope under one arm, and my buddy's got the bones in the other. And I remember we were like, Jesus. Now we got out of the car. I remember I stopped at a phone booth, and I called Geographic's lawyers, and I said, listen, we better get this stuff insured. And I said, well, what do you got? And so, they said, well, the Marsh drawing list, $40,000. I'm going through putting figures on this. And I got Edward Drinker Cope. And what do you mean? I said, well, this is this old professor that's, it's the bones of him. And they said, what's he worth? And I go, I don't know. I don't want to call the museum back and say, like, what do you put the professor at? What's he worth? What's he worth to you? But I was going up to New York next, and I wanted to, in case the van got robbed. And so I remember like everywhere we went, the assistant, we thought, okay, well, everything could get stolen, has a value on it, the cameras, whatever, but we better not get Cope lost. So we'd take him into the restaurants with us and stuff like that. And it's actually a funny story. So I get up to American Museum of Natural History, where Cope used to be one of the curators, and I'm talking to Michael Novacek, who told me about racing Extinction. I went to the Gobi Desert with him, and this predates me finding out about the mass extinction. So I remember we're in the Great Hall there, and we're at in a side room, and we're talking about what the pictures we wanted at the museum, and eventually it gets around to like, well, what's in the box? And I said, oh, it's Edward Drinker Cope. And what I didn't realize, like, bringing a bone hunter to bone hunters was like bringing Elvis to the Hard Rock Cafe. You know what I mean? It's like
the Holy Grail.
Yeah, it was like the whole. They were calling up, departments heads and say, "You got to come down here. You got to see this." Edward Drinker, so everybody gets filmed with him, and so so we carried him around for like a year and a half, and he was in the van with us because I wanted to photograph, collect all these artifacts and then film him somewhere. All these pieces of to illustrate the Great Bone Wars. And I remember I was out in Utah with a guy that was looking for a Utah raptor, paleontologist. And I said, well, we're digging dinosaurs. It was called the Utah raptor. I said, well, do you have any favorite paleontologist? Who's your favorite paleontologist? And he says, Edward Drinker Cope. And I said, would you like to meet him? He's in the van.
What did he say?
I don't remember what he said, but everybody's pretty shocked. And I remember I went to Ghost Ranch, and this is George O'Keefe's ranch, Ghost Ranch. They had a big collection of dinosaurs that all died together at the probably in a flood. These little tiny raptors, and I remember I'm driving out with the paleontologist. So I interviewed her at the museum, and we get to the end of the trailhead, and I'm at this point I'm by myself, and I said, she says, oh, you better lock up your van and take anything out valuable because we get a lot of people break in at the end of the trailhead. So I got all my heavy gear. I said, do you mind taking the box? And so we're walking up to this, like, through the ravines up to the site. And I go, listen, I really don't know much about your work.
Georgia O'Keeffe's carrying the box?
No, we're at her ranch. This is before she already died. She died, but
okay.
I'm with the paleontologist. I'm with the paleontologist.
Okay, I was like,
yeah, no, sorry, probably missed a step there.
That's hilarious.
So I said, I don't know much about your work. Tell me about what you do. And she said, well, I'm not really a paleontologist as much as I am. My work has been done with modern bones, modern syphilitic bones.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and so let's talk about working in mysterious ways. And I go, so who discovered this site? And she mentioned this guy. I think his name was Baldwin. And I said, well, who do you work for? And he goes, oh, Edward Drinker Cope. Now she's carrying his head. And she never met me before, so I didn't want, like, you can imagine, like, I'm afraid to say, like, we're out in the middle of nowhere. It's like, you have his head.
Oh my God!
There's so many situations. So okay, now this is interesting. So I eventually showed it to her, and she's like, "Where did you get this?" And I said, "Well,
Are you sure?
So when it came up to syphilis, that's when I asked her. I said, "Can you tell me if my friend has syphilis?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, I can see behind the ears here. Where'd you get this? Who is this?" Edward Drinker Cope. Anyway, so this is funny. Like, about, then I wasn't living in Boulder then, but I came to interview Dr. Robert Bacher, who's probably one of the most famous dinosaur hunters in the world. A lot of his work between Jack Horner and him was really the grounds for Edward Crichton doing Jurassic Park.
Oh wow!
So I'm at the North Boulder Cafe with Bob Bacher, and we're having breakfast. And I remember I was asking him, because he's really he wrote a book called Dinosaur Heresies, and he's really an interesting guy. He sort of thought, like, I thought, well, here's the one person I really could understand it, because he can really tell us, how do you tell a story that's interesting about dinosaurs and make it interesting, exciting. And I go, Bob, what kind of pictures should I do for the story? And he said, well, they should be counterintuitive. I said, well, what do you mean by that? Well, not all dinosaurs are what you think they are. Some are all so small that they could, fit in the palm of your hand. And I said, wow, who has that? Where can I find that? And he pulls this little vial of bones out of his fishing jacket, and he has this little black bones in a vial, little tiny jaw, little tiny. God, that's incredible. What do you call that? He said, Drinker. And I go, why? He said, well, after Edward Drinker Cope. Have you heard of him? And, and he's sitting between us.
So you were in a restaurant in Boulder.
North Boulder Cafe.
You traveled a year and a half. This reminds me, I can't remember the name of the movie where the dead guy
with Einstein's brain. Einstein's brain.
It was like a B movie, I'm sure. It's like the dead guy, and they travel with him, and the guy died. I can't remember, but it's like, I don't know. It
was a little bit like that.
So what did he say did you tell him?
Oh yeah, I did. Of course I did. There's a picture of of the skull, of sitting on the table.
Oh, in the restaurant you pulled out the skull?
Oh yeah. Because we, back then, we would take them on the planes with us too. So we'd go through the X-rays, and of course people, it'd be like it wasn't TSA back then, but the guy would be like, the guy would be like looking at the bag go through, and look at the screen, look at me, like, is that what I think it is?
What did you say to people like that? Because they're going to think you're like some type of murderer or something. I mean, that would be my first inclination.
Yeah. So, well, I just explained, I had the paperwork, I had my library card. Excuse me.
Oh, no problem. Oh my gosh. My cheeks hurt. These are the best stories. I've been doing this podcast for 3 years, and by far, these are the best. Oh my goodness, this was a great one. I'm so glad. I found these on that your website, the Psihoyos.com. I don't know if it's been updated in a while.
No.
But it had pictures of Donald Trump when he was younger. And
oh boy.
really interesting photos.
Yeah.
I mean, just incredible photos. I was like, oh my goodness, this is great.
Yeah, before I had an interesting life even before we started filming. It was the best thing I've ever done.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine what that would be like. Because, you know, my daughter's best friend from college is also, she went to photojournalism, and she's
Hmm.
like always wants to work for National Geographic. So it's still one of those, you know, those highlights, kind of the what was it, Walter Minnie, oh, it was a movie where he's working for National Geographic or one of the
Oh
thing, and it
yeah,
just, it's just, you know, and when I was a kid, and I mean, this is a while, I'll be 50 next year. So you know, as you get to this age, you know, 60 is not looking so old. 70 is definitely, you're like, yeah,
tell
you're
me
still
about
young. Yeah,
it.
exactly. And, but the National Geographic, the kids version, my grandmother would buy that for me. And I just love that so much. Like I would look so forward to seeing that. Like she'd buy those books with the colors of the fish. And it was just so incredible. I mean, the work was so important to bring that to someone who, I grew up in the desert in New Mexico. So, I mean,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a lot of people learn about life from that magazine back when it was, you know, a little bit more rare than it was today to travel around. Remember, I was working on a story on the sense of smell with a writer by the name of Boyd Gibbons, who did a story on Sunset Boulevard in L.A., and he was interviewing Hugh Hefner for this article, and you know, Boyd said to Hugh Hefner, said, "Well, you know, everything I learned about human anatomy, female anatomy when I was a kid, I learned from your magazine." And Hugh said, "Everything I learned about female anatomy, I learned about from your magazine, because back then they used to, you know, it used to be okay to show, you know,
not,
American, yeah, back
yeah.
then." It was a different era.
Yes, it was for sure. Oh my goodness. Well, we've covered so much, and you're good. I mean, I could talk about your incredible life for hours and hours, but if there's one last bit of advice, excuse me, I laughed too hard now that I can't speak. Hold on. Tea there. One bit of advice that you would say, you know, this is really very important. That's a take home message of all the amazing things we spoke about today. What would that be for someone?
Oh boy, I mean, I don't know. Everything that you do matters, you know, and especially about you know, if you want to change the world, change what's on your plate. If you're not plant-based already, you know, start going that direction. You know, get the right amount of, you know, protein and nutrients. It's easy to do on a plant-based diet, but you know, you'll feel better. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you'll look better. You'll live longer. You know, when I was, well, I don't know. It's this. Do it for yourself, do it for your kids, you know, do it for the planet, do it for other animals. There's a gazillion reasons to become more plant-based, and you know, um, living longer and healthier is probably, you know, I don't know what else could be better than that, is if you can give somebody, you know, a chance at being the healthiest version of themselves that they can be.
Right. You know, there's always those, you hear those commercials for the pharmaceuticals, like results aren't typical, or, you know, there's always these side effects that they list death included. And I always tell my patients, like, you know, I tell them these incredible stories of coming off insulin in 7 days and asthma and hundreds of pounds of weight loss in a year. I said, these results are typical, and your life could be different, and your future, just a
Yeah,
little change, and it's a whole different trajectory. So I think it's very important, and what you speak is truth. So
yeah.
absolutely. So, well, thank you, Louie, for a very entertaining and
Uh,
lovely
well,
conversation.
I do want to say there's just a little pimp for my little
Yes,
pimping my
please,
organization here.
please.
Is if
OPS.
anybody out there, you know, we're a nonprofit organization. If anybody ever wants to support what we do, you know, we're always looking for executive producers or somebody that wants to donate. You know, go to Oceanic Preservation Society. It's a nonprofit organization. Your contributions are tax deductible. So
opsociety.org, and I'll make sure and put all your links there. And is it still based in Boulder?
no, we're actually based in California now.
In Sausalito?
In Sausalito. I'm in Sausalito. You can sort of see the ocean out the
Oh,
back window
I
there.
saw
Yeah, there.
there.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It's raining here and cold.
Oh, yeah.
But I can
No,
see Long's Peak.
but we work up at Skywalker Ranch, Lucas's Skywalker
Oh,
Ranch.
okay.
So we have
Wow.
we have a little bungalow up there where we do our production. So it's a nice little idyllic scene that we have going on here. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's a beautiful area. Well, you've lived in some amazing places then, Boulder and where you are
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. No, I love it. Anyway. Okay. Well, a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. And
Uh,
thanks everyone for listening.